In this video today, I'd like to show you a little bit about the verb forms that we have. So far, we've talked about a few different things concerning the verbs. We've talked about orientation, and that's the idea that verbs are either oriented to the present or the past. Now, to orientation, we added relationship. And relationship is how that action relates to the orientation. Is it earlier? Is it the same time? Or is it later? Now, we also have a third topic that we've talked about called aspect. And aspect relates to the fact, is the action completed or is it not completed? Is it finished or not finished? And what we did is we called that perfective, imperfective. Now, the interesting thing is that these items need to be indicated somehow in sentences, and that's why there are different verb forms. So the first form of a verb is the no-s form. And this is the form we use when the orientation is present, when the relationship is same time, and when the aspect is perfective. So, for example, I talk on the phone every morning. Now we can see one more thing is that this no-s form goes together with subjects like I, you, we, and they. I talk, you talk, we talk, they talk. It could be 3 people talk, and that's the same thing as a they. So the first form is the no-s form. The second form is called the bare root form. Now, why do we call it bare root? Because English, we talk about this is the infinitive, but the truth is the infinitive in English is to together with the verb. Like, for example, to talk or to eat. That's called the infinitive. And English doesn't really have one form of a verb by itself to use as the infinitive. It always puts the bare root form together with to. So that's why we say this is a bare root. It's all alone, kind of like naked. Now also, besides the bare root, so that takes care of these 2 first forms. And there is one more thing I'd like to say about them. Both of these forms are not inflected. Now, what does inflected mean exactly? English has a way to show that verbs have a grammatical relationship. They have a grammatical role in a sentence. For example, I have 1 car, but you and I have 2 cars. The S that I've added on cars is called an inflection because it shows the grammatical role that this has in changing this sentence, this word, from singular to plural. That's called an inflection. It's strictly a grammatical job that this piece we add on does for us. So these first two forms are not inflected, and every verb in English has these same two forms. Every verb has a no S form, and every verb has the bare root form. Now, what's next? The next thing is every verb has an S form. Now, the S form, you can imagine, is very similar to the no S form. It's oriented to the present. The relationship of this action to the present is same time, and it's also perfective. For example, she talks on the phone. He talks on the phone. It talks on the phone. This S form really goes together with subjects like he, she, it, or any other subject that can be replaced with these pronouns. The fourth form is called the ing form. And the ing form, again, well, it shows us imperfective. Remember, we talked about that. And again, every verb has these third and fourth forms. But now what we see is these forms are inflected. For example, the S on the verb tells us that it's present, and the subject is a she, a he, or an it. The ing that we add to the verb shows it's imperfective. These are the inflections, and the job they do is to give us this information about imperfective, about present, about the subject. And again, every verb in English has these same two forms. Now, of course, not every verb has exactly the same S form or ing form, because it's also important to remember that sometimes we have spelling changes. So, for example, let's see here. We have, I should have prepared a example for that. Okay, I can't think of one. Okay, for ing, so we have cut, and then when we make the ing, we have cutting. And, oh, I know, okay. Then we have I watch television. She watches television. It's the S form, but we've added the ES. It's the ing form, but we've actually doubled the final consonant and cut. So there are little changes, spelling changes that we make to the S form and ing, but more or less it's the same form for all verbs. Now let's continue, and let's take a look at our fifth form. That's the past form. And the past form we use when we talk about the past. and when the action is perfective or finished. For example, he talked on the phone last night. We can see the ed is the inflection that we add to this verb to show its job is to signal the past. We also have a sixth form, and that's called the past participle. And the past participle will also look the same. He has talked on the phone. So both of these verbs are inflected. And they're inflected with ed to show past and ed to show past participle. But now the important thing we need to mention is this is how regular verbs are inflected. Regular verbs mean that the past form and past participle forms add ed to both forms, and it's the same for all verbs, except the irregular verbs. Now, irregular verbs have a different way to inflect for the past and the past participle forms. So let's take a look. Now, one way that irregular verbs inflect are they make a change in the vowel sound. For example, buy, yesterday we bought, and the past participle, they have bought. And even though the spelling is different, really it's the vowel sound that's important. We can have a verb like meet. Yesterday we have met, and then the past participle, they have met before. Ring, yesterday rang, past participle, rung, and then we have speak. Oh, excuse me. Oh, yes, we do have speak, spoke, spoken. We can see there are some different ways to do this to inflect the irregular verbs. And we have say and said, past participle said. So one way that irregular verbs inflect for the past and past participle is by making vowel sound changes. Some of them also add n at the end. But there is another way that vowels can be inflected, that verbs can be inflected. And another way is some verbs, irregular verbs, do not change the past or past participle forms. For example, every week I cut my finger. Yesterday I cut my finger, and I have cut my finger almost every week this year. We can see that it actually, the verb form doesn't look inflected. But there is an inflection, and that's the no change. That's why it's irregular. Now, there's another way that verb forms can show past and, some past and past participle forms, is they actually change words. Go, went, gone. So we have the bare root, we have the past, we have the participle, past participle. You have am, are, is, was, were, been. That's probably the most famous irregular verb in English. Now, at one time in English, many verbs were irregular, but today that's changed, and the vast majority have become regular through a process called analogy. Verbs start to change so that they look like other verbs, and that's what's happened. As we continue into the next video, we're going to be talking about irregular verbs more. But for the time being, let's stop. You may want to take a look at this video once more. Make sure that everything's clear to you. If you want, maybe make some notes, because we're going to be using both videos, for our activities this week.